Hello, everyone. Today I'll be walking you through the song All Comes Down to You here in Cubase and really peeling back the layers of what consists of this song as far as instrumentation, the layering that I use, the structure that I use. I won't really go into the mixing aspect, but more so the song structure aspect, which is really what I'm really into right now. So anyway, let's just start out from the beginning. So we'll start with the intro.
They are
So starting out there, all the percussion that goes through the song is actually groove agent. So for the kick drum, it's actually a combination of this sound, which is very low, and then just to give it some high end. And that together just gives us the kick. Now you do hear some reverb. That's actually some external reverb that I use outside of this VST, just to kind of give it some space. As far as the snare goes, it's actually three different types of samples, that kind of crispy, distorted sound, a very processed snare sound, and kind of like a low end snare sound, and that together. And later in the song, you'll hear some toms, which is actually just the same sample, but I just changed the pitch of it and I pan them across the stereo field. And just another little bit of layering with this snare, which is also various samples. And so the way that I actually have the kick drum come in the intro, you could hear that it's rolled off on the high end. And basically all I did was I automated the cutoff right here. As you can see, if I go to the beginning of the song, it starts rising.
they are opening.
Introducing the high end of the kick drum. So the synth sound that actually comes in the intro, which also is kind of rolled off as far as the high end to kind of give it that swelling motion, is this right here. And again, just automating the cutoff of that sound just to roll off the high end. And in support of that sound, I have another layer which kind of is the exact same notes, but just a completely different sound that gives it this kind of like delay, because I delayed it by a few milliseconds, so it kind of dances around the actual first synth. And that sounds like this. So it's almost like an eerie type of delay. And that together just coming into the first verse.
They are opening their eyes. Sure, they start to realize through all the things you do.
So going to the second verse.
It all comes down to you. What
We get introduced to some new layers. So as far as synths go, you get introduced to this choir, which just outline the chords of the second verse and the first verse. So these are the chords that basically transpire throughout the verse. Some guitars that come in are used via the helix. So for this one is just again supporting the chord progression via some strums. And all that is Helix native. And I'm really just using the stock first preset that comes up on the Helix. All I did was just alter some things, like add some more reverb, add some distortion to add a little bit of grit. Now, something that I really try to exercise is just recording the wet tone of a sound that I like, just so I don't have to do everything inside of the box. So if the sound works, I'll just record it wet and stick to that sound. And I ended up just finding this very deep reverb sound for guitar and made this layer, which is me just bending on the guitar, bending a specific note. and it just works as kind of something in the background, something atmospheric.
When things go a bit astray. No.
Now that thing that you're hearing right there, and what that really is by itself, with some processing that I did, which includes adding a little bit of distortion, is just a pad. So you could hear the distortion there, but what I really like about Cubase is that it has this effects modulator, and I just kind of went through the presets, and it kind of gives you all these various modulations that, when working together, really mangle the sound to end up with. And that sound is really just in the background, highlighting certain chords within the verse.
When things go a bit astray. Know that there's more than one way.
As far as vocals go, this is the first time that I introduce the side vocals, and they really just function as an addition to the main line. They just repeat the lyric and add a different sense of melody aside from the main one being established by the vocal.
There's more than just one way. The things you do.
So they're kind of drowned in reverb just to give it some space.
You do. It all comes down to you.
And then we're led into the first chorus.
Come and see the glow.
Now, some guitars that come in during the chorus are these two octave guitars, which are the wet signal from the Helix. I believe they're like a Cali rectifier preset that comes stock with the Helix. Again, I'm not really meddling with tones to the 10th degree. I find something that I like, I record it, and I'm kind of stuck with that tone. And all I did for this was really just add some EQ to allow it to sit in the mix just a little bit better. And then adding some multi-band compression to control some of the low end that might come out from the tone. But that sounds like this. And as you can hear, I have some octave delays going on there, which kind of add some space to the whole layer, making it sound a little bit more bigger than what it really is, which is just two guitars panned left and right. So taking it from the transition.
Come and see the glow of flames, lighting paths no one can make.
So as far as synthesizer sounds, what I have here in the beginning are hard-hitting chords. And underneath that, I just have a pad using the same chords, but just kind of really holding down the essence of what the chord is. And what you'll come to see is that the main layer that's carried out throughout the whole song and is really just kind of underneath everything is the first layer that comes in the beginning of the song, which is. It just then starts to match the chords being played for the chorus. So all the layering together, including the guitars. And then with everything.
Silent forces start to move. Echoes rise, shadows prove. Don't run, can't hide from what's true.
And then we're led into this little interlude lead is what I call this section. And it's just a little guitar lead which sounds like this. And as you can see here, I go up in volume and you can audibly hear it too. But that's mainly because I rise up with some other layers that I'll show you now. One of those being a guitar harmony. And actually, right before going into the interlude lead, the only real thing kind of letting us know what the chord content of this intersection is this little arp. So going into the transition. The bass is also, again, utilizing the cutoff. It really alters the sound of the bass, but going into that intersection, that is the cutoff, which dramatically changes the sound of the bass to give it this more percussive sound. That's happening throughout the transition. Now, something that also amplifies the rise of the end of that solo are these vocal stacks that I put right here. As you can see here, it says vocal rise. And what I ended up doing was I just recorded individual tracks of me singing these harmonies, and then I just bounced it down into its own file just so I didn't have 5 different vocal tracks. I just bounced it into one, including the panning information and all the processing. And what that sounds like is I have a lot of processing on there. You don't see it here because I just baked it in, but I had some warble in there. I had a chorus. I had all this weird stuff just to kind of add some nuance to it. But the main vocal, and then the little chipmunk vocal. So you could hear there's some weird modulation going on there. And on top of that, I ended up finding some weird drone that I ended up processing and then reversing with some reverb. So you get that rise. So altogether, going from the guitar lead, which leads into this stripped verse, sounds like this. So up here, you can see the label for this section is stripped verse. And that's really just because I took the first section of the original verse and I stripped it down just to kind of give it some different flavor. And what I did with the vocals is ended up kind of lo-fiing them.
Let the silence start to speak. Answers hide in what we see.
It sounds a little bit like an old radio.
The silence start to speak.
The little synth line that you're hearing is actually something that I bounced. It was originally a sound from a synthesizer that I just, once again, I altered, I manipulated, and then once I got it to what I kind of wanted it to sound like, I just bounced and baked in all the effects. And there's actually this little bell sound as well at the beginning of this stripped verse.
The silence start to speak.
And then going into the second portion of the verse, you get some vocal harmonies, as well as some other layers, which I'll show in a second.
And through all the things you do, it all comes down to you.
So some of the layers that kind of help with that shift from going into the lo-fi and then coming back to sound more modern in terms of the frequencies that you're hearing is this right here. So you'll hear the original lo-fi little sound that takes us through the lo-fi section and then what it turns into. And then so you can hear the transition between the two.
And through all the things you do, it all comes down to you. Even when skies turn gray.
So going into the remainder of that verse, you're hearing the exact same layers that occurred here on the first time the verse 2 comes around. All the same layers are there. Well, what I ended up adding was this kind of like hi-hat type of sound. It's not a hi-hat whatsoever, but in the mix kind of sounds like it's the high-end percussion. Almost sounds like a xylophone or something like that, but it's like this weird distorted xylophone sound. And then going into the chorus once more, I have this riser type of sound to kind of help transition, which sounds like. And the pan on that I actually did manually. And this is again a riser that I believe it didn't sound like this, but I just added a bunch of reverb, and then after adding the reverb, I reversed it so I can get that swell. And then I just baked it because I don't want to have a bunch of plugins just kind of eating up my CPU. So once I kind of find the sound that I like, I just bake it and make it its own track. So going back into the chorus, every single layer that occurred within the first chorus is now present. The only real difference is that coming into this chorus in the song, I tried with the lead vocal to be a little bit more powerful, so it kind of crescendos upwards throughout the song's entirety. Now, the only reason why I call this chorus B is because technically the first chorus and chorus A here, they're the same chord progression. But for chorus B, I ended up adding some additional chords which don't occur the first time the chorus comes around. So the chord differences between these two choruses and this one are right here. Those chords don't occur when the original chorus comes about. They act more as a extension to add a different type of line or melody leading back into the chorus. And then when we go back to the original chord progression, I do some vocal harmonies and I drown them in reverb to kind of give it this big ending towards the end.
Come and see the glow of flames, lighting paths no one can name. Come and see the glow of flames, lighting paths no one can name.
So there's a lot of additional layers going on there, mainly on the sides. Since this song was kind of taking up a electronic feel, I wanted to have the typical like side distortion kind of risers or just synthesizers kind of emphasizing the bass line. And what that sound is it's actually two sounds. So the first one is, and to kind of emphasize a little bit more, I added a a higher octave. Now underneath that, I also added these arpeggios with like bells. Which aren't very audible in the grand scheme of things, but they are adding a sense of high end to the song that without it, it does lose something. So, chorus section.
Come and see the
Again, another layer that I'm calling hi-hats, and it really is just this kind of weird layer that kind of rotates around. You can't really hear in the context of the song like that it's actually playing chords as well, but what I really used it for was for the high-end clicks and clangs. And then this is where we go into the chorus extension because I take the last two chords of the chorus and I double time them, meaning I replay them twice over, longer than they originally are played, just to make room for this synth lead that is comprised of a few sounds that I just bounced. But they're all practically within the same family or category of sounds. So within the context. And basically, all these sounds are what makes the synth line. And it's just a combination of a few sounds. So the first sound, the second sound, third, fourth, and the last layer. Now, the reason why they're all heavily distorted is because I bounced them into their own group, and then I just did some processing to kind of unify them and make them one unit. So all together. Now they're very distorted, but I needed that distortion in order to allow it to sit better in the mix because there's so many layers that already have a lot of high-end energy and distortion in of themselves. So you actually, while it may sound pretty abrasive by itself, you can't really decipher or pick up on that distortion when you hear everything together. And that's basically the end of the song. So if you guys have any questions in regards to any aspect of my process of how I go right, on how I make these sounds, or how I just go about song structure, feel free to hit me up, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.